The idea of redoing Tilt really came about from Kael. He studies with me. We spent some time in China together, and we've done all kinds of things. And he's got his own album out, and he's got his own career happening.
When we were planning for the China tour, I thought it might be very cool to play some of his compositions on stage together. And Greg sent me a couple of his compositions, and Tilt was one of them. Unfortunately, with a very little rehearsal time that we had, we didn't actually play Tilt on stage. So Tilt has been on my mind ever since. As a matter of fact, Tilt was never even performed on stage after its initial release back in 1995.
It requires 2 guitar players, and it's kind of a tricky song, but it's not tricky enough to keep me from performing it live.
So after the tour, I reached out to Greg one more time.
And at first it kind of seemed really odd to me, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought it wouldn't be bad to do that. You know, Kael's a great player. It gives people who haven't heard that song a chance to hear it. I thought, yeah, let's try it. It'd probably be fun. And it was.
My goal isn't to surpass the original version, but to put my own spin on it.
I'd say the biggest difference, obviously, is the fact that Richie Kotzen is not the other guitar player, and instead it's Kael. I thought Kael sounded great. I thought he did a great job. He's got great chops. He's got a lot of aggression and a lot of conviction behind his playing. So it's, if you like shred, you're gonna like the way he plays. Very accurate stuff. He's got a passion for high, intense energy guitar. So I thought it was really cool, and I also like the fact that he really contrasts Richie's style. Richie plays a lot differently than him.
The process of making this remake is actually quite unusual because we live in different places, so we have to do this remotely.
I recorded the original bass, sequenced the drums, and recorded my guitar parts, sent that to Kael, and then Kael decided to hire musicians and get a real drummer and get a real keyboard player, and ended up hiring a real bass player. They all put their stuff on there, and then Kael put his guitar on top of that, and I think that's more or less the process.
Greg also is overseeing this entire project because it's his song. And as a massive Greg Howe fan, the last thing I want to do is to butcher his song. So every step of the way, I would send him a version or a mix down just to get his input on, so that the end result is something that he is comfortable releasing.
I went back and listened to it, and I remembered the rig that I used to use back then. I remember exactly what it was. A very strange rig. A lot of people wondered about my tone back then, so here's the big reveal. That was recorded primarily on a Fender Dual Showman amp. This is a modified Fender Dual Showman amp that I've had for almost 30 years. I basically hooked up everything the way that I had it back then. So what I used to do is I used to hit the front end of this Fender amp with this old Boss ME5 tube screamer, with the tube screamer, but old Boss ME5. And the tube screamer would actually sit in the effects loop of this unit. So it was a combination of the distortion coming from this, as well as the original 808 tube screamer. And that's all hitting the front of the Fender Dual Showman amp. And when I hooked it back up again, it was pretty darn close. So I used that for the leads, and for most of the rhythm, I ended up using the same idea, but plugged into my DV Mark tube amp, which is a prototype, but should be released this year. So that was really where the tone was coming from. As far as guitars, the original recording was done with probably my favorite guitar that I've ever owned. This is built personally by Dan Smith from Fender, and it was for the Michael Jackson tour, so it's sort of a shred guitar in disguise. I wanted it to look real vintagey, and so when you first see it, you're like, oh yeah, candy apple red Stratocaster, and then you get up close, you go, oh wait, 24 frets, humbucker in the bridge, Floyd Rose. So it's a very fast, easy to play, cool, pretty flat neck guitar, but it really did help match that sound again. For most of the rhythm parts, I used my trusty Kiesel. So yeah, it was that was basically what I used on this.
I played 2 different guitars on this one. First one being this ESP Custom Horizon, played and owned by Greg Howe himself. So this is a traditional double cutaway style guitar with a Floyd Rose and the locking nut as well, for sure, and has a mini humbucker in the neck and a full-size humbucker in the bridge. And also, it has a Greg Howe signature in the back of the headstock, which is pretty cool. So the next guitar that I use is this Moonlight model from Leaky Guitars. So this one has a jumbled stainless steel frets and a pretty chunky neck, and dual humbucker style, and just 1 volume, 1 master tone, and a 3-way toggle switch, which is pretty standard these days. Has a lot of maple in it, and has a maple cap and a maple binding, maple inlays, and even the back of the neck has a piece of flame maple in it. So it's a pretty cool looking guitar. I was using this HND custom built amplifier, tube amp. Has a toggle switch to switch back and forth from a 5 watt setting and a 15 watt setting.
We have live drums this time, which is nice. We have an actual bass player that's not just a guy like me, a guitar player trying to play bass. We have a real keyboard player, because I actually did do some of the original keyboard sequencing and some live playing back then as well.
With the help of Greg Howe on guitar and Ernest Tibbs on bass, Patrick Sui on drums, Asher Fulero on keys, and Zen Mai on mixing and engineering, who are some of the best musicians that I'm aware of. I truly believe that we have a product that at least myself could be proud of for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I could see you very soon. Bye-bye.